analyst, the planter's most reliable guide will be experiment on the spot. Planting. In the past, insufficient care has been taken in the selection of seed. The planter should choose the large, plump beans with a pale interior, or he should choose the nearest kind to this that is sufficiently hardy to thrive in the particular environment. He can plant 1. Direct from seeds, or 2. From seedlings, plants raised in nurseries in bamboo pots, or 3. By grafting or budding. It is usual to plant 2 or 3 seeds in each hole, and destroy the weaker plants when about a foot high. The seeds are planted from 12 to 15 feet apart. The distance chosen depends chiefly on the richness of the soil. The richer the soil, the more ample room is allowed for the trees to spread without choking each other. Interesting results have been obtained by Hart and others by grafting the fine but tender criollo onto the hardy forastero, but until yesterday the practice had not been tried on a large scale. Experiments were begun in 1913 by Mr. W. G. Friedman in Trinidad, which promise interesting results. By 1919 the Department of Agriculture had 7 acres in grafted and budded cacao. In a few years it should be possible to say whether it pays to form an estate of budded cacao in preference to using seedlings. There are no longer any mystic rites performed before planting. In the old days it was the custom to solemnize the planting, for example, by sacrificing a cacao-colored dog. Shade, temporary and permanent. When the seeds are planted, such small plants as cassava, chilies, pigeon peas, and the like are planted with them. The object of planting these is to afford the young cacao plant shelter from the sun and to keep the ground in good condition. Incidentally, the planter obtains cassava, which gives tapioca, red peppers, etc., as a catch crop, whilst he is waiting for the cacao tree to begin to yield. Bananas and plantains are planted with the same object, and these are allowed to remain for a longer period. Such is the rapidity of plant growth in the tropics that in 3 or 4 years the cacao tree is taller than a man, and begins to bear fruit in its 4th or 5th year. Now it is agreed that, as with men, the cacao tree needs protection in its youth, but whether it needs shade trees when it is fully grown is one of the controverted questions. When the planter is sitting after his day's work is done, and no fresh topic comes to his mind, he often reopens the discussion on the question of shade. The idea that cacao trees need shade is a very ancient one, as shown in a very old drawing, possibly the oldest drawing of cacao extant, beneath which is written, "Of the tree which bears cacao, which is money, and how the Indians obtained fire with 2 pieces of wood." In this drawing you will observe how lovingly the shade tree shelters the cacao. The intention in using shade is to imitate the natural forest conditions in which the wild cacao grow. Sometimes, when clearing the forest, certain large trees are left standing, but more frequently and with better judgment chosen kinds are planted. Many trees have been used: the salmon, breadfruit, mango, mammet, sandbox, poidu, rubber, etc. In the illustration showing kipok acting as a parasol for cacao in Java, we see that the proportion of shade trees to cacao is high. Leguminous trees are preferred because they conserve the nitrogen in the soil. Hence, in Trinidad the favorite shade tree is erythrina, or bois immortel, so called, a humorist suggests, because it is short-lived. It is also rather prettily named Mother of Cacao. Usually the shade trees are planted about 40 feet apart, but there are cacao plantations which might cause a stranger to inquire, "Is this an immortelle plantation?" so closely are these conspicuous trees planted. When looking down a Trinidad valley richly planted with cacao, one sees in every direction the silver-gray trunks of the immortelle. In the early months of the year these trees have no leaves. They are a mass of flame-colored flowers, each shafted like a scimitar. It pays well the labor of climbing a hill to look down on this vermilion glory. Some Trinidad planters believe that their trees would die without shade. Yet in Grenada, only 100 miles north as the steamer sails, there are whole plantations without a single shade tree. The Grenadians say, "You cannot have pods without flowers, and you cannot have good flowering without light and air." Shade trees are not used on some estates in San Thomé, and in Brazil there are cocoa kings with 200,000 trees without one shade tree. It should be mentioned, however, that in these countries the cacao trees are planted more closely, about 8 feet apart, and themselves shade the soil. Professor Carmody, in reporting recently on the result of a 4-year experiment with 1. Shade, 2. No shade, 3. Partial shade, says that so far partial shade has given the best results. No general solution has yet been found to the question of the advantage of shade, and as Shaw states for morality, so in agriculture, the golden rule is that there is no golden rule. Not only is there the personal factor, but nature provides an infinite variety of environments, and the best results are obtained by the use of methods appropriate to the local conditions. Form of tree growth desired. Suckers. Viscount Mountmorres, in a delightfully clear exposition of cacao cultivation which he gave to the native farmers and chiefs of the Gold Coast in 1906, said: "In pruning it is necessary always to bear in mind that the best shape for cacao trees is that of an enlarged open umbrella, with a height under the umbrella not exceeding 7 feet. With this ideal in mind, the planter should train up the tree in the way it should go." Viscount Mountmorres also said that everything that grows upwards, except the main stem, must be cut off. This opens a question which is of great interest to planters as to whether it is wise to allow shoots to grow out from the main trunk near the ground. Some hold that the high yield on their plantation is due to letting these upright shoots grow. Mi amigo Corsicano said, "Diavolo, let the cacao trees grow. Let them branch off like any other fruit tree, say the tamarind. The chupon or sucker will in time bear more than its mother." There seems to be some evidence that old trees profit from the chupons because they continue to bear when the old trunk is weary, but this is compensated by the fact that the chupons, Portuguese for suckers, were grown at the expense of the tree in its youth. Hence other planters call them thieves and gormandizers, saying that they suck the sap from the tree, turning all to wood. They follow the advice given as early as 1730 by the author of the Natural History of Chocolate, when he says, "Cut or lop off the suckers." In Trinidad experiments have been started, and after a 5 years' test, Professor Carmody says that the indications are that it is a matter of indifference whether chupons are allowed to grow or not. After hunting, agriculture is man's oldest industry, and improvements come but slowly, for the proving of a theory often requires work on a huge scale carried out for several decades. The husbandry of the earth goes on from century to century with little change, and the methods followed are the winnowings of experience, tempered with indolence. And even with the bewildering progress of science in other directions, sound improvements in this field are rare discoveries. There is a great scope for the application of physical and chemical knowledge to the production of the raw materials of the tropics. In 1 or 2 instances, notable advances have been made. Thus the direct production of white sugar, as now practiced at Java, at the tropical factory will have far-reaching effects, but with many tropical products the methods practiced are as ancient as they are haphazard. Like all methods founded on long experience, they suit the environment